Get Alive, a film about verdicts pronounced over living things, a coat, a carving, a people, and about the long road every one of them took home. The Coat, Act 1, The Coat. Every thread of this film begins in a single chapter of Genesis, with a piece of evidence that was manufactured, a verdict that was wrong, a man who was mourned for decades while he was still alive. The brothers do not kill Joseph. They kill a goat. They dip his famous coat into its blood and carry the garment home. And they let their father do the rest. Jacob reads the cloth exactly as it was designed to be read. An evil beast, he says, in the Hebrew, Chayah-ra-ah, has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. Notice what has happened. No body has been found. No beast has been seen. A verdict of death has been pronounced entirely on the testimony of a surface. Slide. A verdict rendered on a garment. Jacob tears his own clothes and refuses all comfort. I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning, he says. He plans to die, still believing the coat. And then verse 36, with terrible economy, tells us what actually happened. The Midianites sold him into Egypt, into Potiphar. The beast is a fiction told over a slave sale. The mourning is real, the death is not. That is the engine of this entire film. In this story, the clothes always testifies, and it lies. Clothing testifies all the way through the Joseph cycle, and it testifies falsely. The coat convicts a beast that never existed. Potiphar's wife holds up his garment and convicts an innocent man a second time. And when the reversal finally comes, it comes as a change of clothes, out of prison rags into Egyptian linen, the living man revealed. America understood this story early. In Boston, in the year 1700, the first anti-slavery tract printed in New England took its title straight from this chapter, The Selling of Joseph. And in the generations that followed, enslaved Christians preached Joseph as their own biography, sold by brothers, mourned as dead, alive in a strange land, waiting to be known again. Act 2, The Carvers. To follow the coat, we go to the coastline in West Africa and to a people whose work was mourned as devoured centuries before anyone thought to check. When Portuguese ships arrived in Sierra Leone in the late 1400s, they met people they called the Sapi, the ancestors of the Bulam, the Temni, and the Sherbo, and they wrote home about the carvings. Sapi workshops produced the famous Sapi Portuguese ivories, salt cellars, spoons, hunting horns, and commissioned for the courts of Europe and kept in their treasuries for 5 centuries. The same coast carved in stone human figures, animal figures, cut from soapstone, and in many of them the surface wrapped in fields of incised cross-hatching. Slide. Nomoli at Pomtan. Scholars call the Sierra Leone figurines Nomoli, and their cousins in Kissi country, Pomdo, in the plural, Pomtan. Frederick Lamp's landmark study in 1983 read them as memorial art, ancestral figures of the historic Sapi, broadly 15th to 17th century. Others have argued for older roots. This film takes an honest position. The dating is built from style, context, and history, not from laboratory certainty, and it remains disputed. What is not disputed is this: the carvers left no testimony of their own. The figures would have to speak for them. The breaking, the main invasions from 1545 onward. Then came the breaking. In the mid-1500s, Mandi-speaking warriors, the Portuguese called the Main, swept into the Sapi coast in waves. Wars the chroniclers recorded as catastrophic. Towns fell. Captives from those wars fed the earliest slave ships operating off that shore. The ivory workshops went silent. Within a generation, a carving tradition that had astonished Europe effectively vanished from the record, not because the people ceased to exist, but because the world stopped being able to see them. Remember that distinction. It is the difference between a death and a disappearance. Slide, the rice gods raised from the soil. And then, centuries later, the ground gave them back. Mende Temne farmers clearing and tilling began striking carved stone faces in the earth. They did not know the makers. How could they? Mende concluded the figures were not made by human hands at all. They were found things, spirit-given. So the farmers stood them up in the rice fields as guardians of the harvest and the so-called rice gods. And ethnographers even recorded a farmer flogging his nomoli after a bad year, the way you might scold a lazy watchman. Hold that image. A tradition mourned as devoured, pulled living out of the very ground it was mourned into. Jacob's verdict overturned by a plow. A note on the stone itself, because this film will lean on it later, and must lean honestly. Steatite soapstone is soft under the blade. Heat it up roughly 1,000 degrees Celsius and its talc converts toward enstatite, a harder, fire-changed mineral. That much is laboratory fact. Whether any particular figure, African or Appalachian, actually passed through such a fire is a question for instruments, object by object, not for assertion. Keep that flag in view. It marks the line between what we know and what we are testing. Slide, the road. Act 3, the road. In Genesis, one verse carries Joseph from the pit into Potiphar's house. In the Atlantic world, the verse was an industry, and it had an address. Bunce Island, a low island in the Sierra Leone River, close enough to the Sabi coast that the geography needs no metaphor. From about 1670 until Britain abolished the trade in 1807, English firms ran a fortified slave castle there, Bunce Island. From 1748, its operators were the London House of Grant, Oswald and Company, the merchant Richard Oswald among its principals. Behind its walls, captives from the interior wars were held, sorted, and loaded for Western passage. Oswald and Lawrence, the Rice Coast Premium. Oswald's agent in Charleston was Henry Lawrence, one of the great slave factors in North America, and the later president of the Continental Congress. The planters of Carolina and Georgia paid a premium for captives from the Rice Coast, Senegambia, Sierra Leone, and the Windward Coast, because they were buying agricultural expertise along with human beings. Rice built those colonies, and the knowledge became shackled. In 1782, at the peace talks in Paris, a slave castle owner and the slave factor faced one another as negotiators of American liberty. The ledgers of Bunce Island are incomplete. The traffic ran in many thousands over its span, and this will not pretend to a precision the records themselves do not hold. Charleston, Savannah, and the Gula Geechee corridor. The lane from Sierra Leone to Charleston and Savannah was direct enough that its wake is still measurable. In the Gullah Geechee communities of the Low Country Coast, language, craft, and song carried West African and specifically Sierra Leonean continuities straight through slavery and out the other side. The historian Joseph Opala spent a career tracing that connection, ship by ship and word by word, and every captive on that lane was, in the Genesis sense, a Joseph, sold out of one world, mourned there as lost, alive and unwitnessed in another. The families left behind never received a coat. They received silence, which reads the same way. The mountains. Act 4. The road past the end at the coast. For some, it bent inland, up the rivers, past the fall line, into the Blue Ridge Mountains. Towards the Blue Ridge, the runaway advertisements in the Charleston and Savannah papers say it plainly. Gone toward the back country, gone toward the Cherokee towns. The record of African-descended people in Cherokee country between 1700 and 1880 1838 is real, and it is layered. Runaways sheltered and runaways captured, intermarriage, black Cherokee families, and, by the 19th century, slaveholding among the Cherokee elite themselves. Theda Purdue and Tia Miles have written both sides of that ledger, the refuge and the bondage, and this film honors the complexity rather than flattening it. What is documented is presence. What remains open, and honestly open, is what presence is left in the ground. The koala world in the Garden Creek. Archaeologists call the late Cherokee era of those mountains the koala phase, roughly 1450 to 1838, a world that came to include horses, firearms, and trade goods, the very things depicted or implied on some of the contested carvings. Garden Creek on the Pigeon River below Mount Pisgah was an ancient and layered place long before that era, and a Cherokee town within it. Whether that town bore the name Cayuga is a live research question submitted for tribal review and flagged in this film as unresolved, not assumed. Then, 1838, removal. The Trail of Tears emptied the towns, and tradition holds the hearth fires still burning when the people were driven out, a living world declared closed, and marched away alive. The Death Certificate, Act 5. 41 years after removal, men with shovels came to Garden Creek, and what they lifted out of the ground was about to receive a verdict written in Jacob's own method. The Valentines, 1879 to 1884. Beginning in 1879, Man Valentine II of Richmond, with his sons, financed digging across Haywood County, the mounds and slopes across Garden Creek and Mount Pisgah. They recovered thousands of objects, unquestioned Cherokee and earlier material, and among it, the carved stones at the center of the story. The collection went home to Richmond and seeded the Valentine Museum. Man Valentine believed the carvings extraordinary and said so in print. Two things can be true at once, and this film insists on both. The site is unquestionably real, stratified, ancient, and sacred. The corpus lifted from it is where the argument begins. Nature, July 1882, the first verdict. The first verdict came fast, and it came from Washington by the way of London. Over the 13th of July, 1882, Charles Rowe of the Smithsonian published a dismissive notice in the journal Nature, volume 26, pages 43 to 44, declaring the Mount Pisgah carvings unworthy of belief. 1 week later, in the same journal, Man Valentine replied, pages 267 and 268, and was largely unheard. Mark the sequence. The verdict preceded the fieldwork, and as with Jacob, judgment was rendered by reading surfaces at a distance. And as with Jacob, it would harden into decades of refusal to be comforted or corrected. Asheville, 1883, the altered voucher. Then the paper trail turned strange. In 1883, the Bureau of Ethnology's field agent, John W. Emmert, purchased carved stones at Asheville, recorded at the time as ethnologic specimens. The Treasury voucher behind that purchase, record group 217, account number 237177, carries a payee line altered on the certified copy. The Burnett name changed. The alteration itself is proven on the document. That it was an act of a certifying clerk, McChesney, is graded strong. Sit with what that means. The paper trail behind the verdict is itself a tampered garment. Evidence dressed after the fact presents it as testimony. 1894, the bogus articles and the drawers close. The institutional seal came in 1894, and Cyrus Thomas's great report on mound explorations, the Bureau's monumental settling of the mound question. There, the carved stones were filed among bogus articles. Follow the drift of the language. Ethnologic specimens in 1883, bogus in 1894. The narrative shifted. The objects did not. And the verdict functioned exactly as a death certificate functions. For roughly 140 years, the corpus sat locked in drawers in Richmond and Washington and Chapel Hill, mourned, unexamined, and, like Joseph in Egypt, never once interviewed. Slide, the bear born as life. Act 6, the bear born as life. Genesis convicts an imaginary beast of an imaginary death. The people of this continent kept a different relationship with the animal, and it inverts the coat completely. Anitasagwe, the Cherokee tradition that James Mooney recorded in 1900, an entire clan, the Anitasagwe, chose to leave human life and become the bears. And in departing, they left the people a promise. Call on us in the woods when you hunger. Do not fear to kill us, for we shall live always. Hear what the story does in Jacob's verdict. In those mountains, the bear is not the beast that devoured your relative. The bear is your relative, kin presumed lost, who is in fact alive. And who said so? The clan worn on the body. Across the eastern woodland, the clan is worn on the body. The Anishinaabe carry the totem, the Ho-Chunk carry the bear clan. The effigy and regalia place the animal on human form as lineage, not as a menace. Looking at bear effigies from the Pisgah corpus, the Anishinaabe writer Gerald Wiesnor noted the reaching arms and long noses of the clan sign, and Wiesnor gave the whole posture its name, survivance, an active sense of presence over absence, not survival as mere endurance, presence as declaration. The inversion. So set the two signs side by side. In Genesis, animal sign placed on a garment manufactures a death. A beast mark says he is gone. On the bear-clothed figures, animal sign carried on the body proclaims a living lineage. A bear mark says, we are here, and we shall live always. It is the same grammar, creature, surface, sign, read in opposite directions. One is a forged death certificate, the other is a birth record that refuses to expire. Yet alive. Act 7, Yet alive. Every thread of this film, the coat, the carvers, the road, the mountains, the verdict, the bear, now arrives at the same place, the moment the mourned thing speaks. Amelia's song. Begin with a song, Harris Neck, Georgia. In early 1830s, the linguist Lorenzo Dow Turner records an elderly woman by the name of Amelia Dowley singing a short song by her family that her family had passed down in a language that no one around her could name. Decades later, researchers identified it, Mendi, a funeral song, and in 1997, they traced it to a single village. Senahun Ngola in Sierra Leone, where the woman still knew it. Amelia's daughter, Mary Moran, traveled there and sang it with them, a song carried out of Sierra Leone in the hold of the slave ship, presumed lost and alive at the whole time on both sides of the ocean, waiting, like Joseph, to be recognized by its family. In 1999, a notice of the Federal Register under NAGPRA, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, completed the inventory for Garden Creek. The remains of 35 ancestors held for generations in institutional collections were repatriated to the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. Read that plainly. The people whom the 1894 report had filed away as a closed question walked their relatives home. It is Genesis 45:26, and in administrative prose. The messengers arrive against a century of settled mourning and say, they are yet alive, and they are yours. The site still speaking, and the site itself never stopped speaking to anyone willing to listen. The collectors came again in 1915, Cohen Keel's Cherokee Project worked the ground in the 60s and 70s, and Keel's synthesis published in 1976. And in the last decade, Alice Wright's geophysical survey and excavation revealed geometric enclosures beside the mountains, middle woodland, tied to the Great Hopewell Exchange World. Beneath Mountain Number 1 lie the Twin Earth Lodges, architecture of council and ceremony, sealed under the later construction. Every modern season deepens the same conclusion. This was never a place about which one verdict could be enough. What the film claims and does not. So let the film state its claim with the discipline the subject deserves. Proven, Garden Creek is an authenticated, ancient, stratified site. The 1883 voucher was altered. The alteration was the clerk's act. The Sierra Leone Low Country connection is documented history. African-descended people lived in Cherokee country across that long century, in roles both of refuge and bondage, interpreted and labeled so. The Genesis parallel, the Nomalian analogy, the bear sign inversion, frameworks offered, not proven, unresolved, the authorship and fire history of the individual carvings, the Canoga name, any African-handed Pishka, and rejected in both directions, blanket fraud or blanket authentication. It's a mixed corpus. There's no shortcuts in either direction. Jacob believed a coat for 22 years. The farmers believed the figures fell from the sky. The Bureau believed its own filing system for 140 years. And every case, the correction came the same way, not as an argument, but as an arrival. The messengers come up from Egypt. The plow strikes the face in the field. The song finds its village. The ancestors come home from the mountains. Joseph is yet alive. And what was meant as an ending, the pit, the ship, the drawer, turns out, in the long grammar of the story, to have been the road. Yet alive. This is thanks to the Bureau's Research Banner 2026 with respect to the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, the Cherokee Nation, the United Kiowa Band, the Gullah Geechee communities whose history this film touches. The drawers are open. The work continues.